What is up? I'm Miguel Antonio, and you are listening to the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. And before we jump into the podcast, I'd love for you to check out my band, Run With It. Here's a clip from one of our songs called It's Not Over.
With this blood on my mouth, they almost knocked me out. I was down and they were counting. I could hear in the crowd, they had it all figured out. Tried to kill me with this shouting. Where did they see that look in my eye? Stood up, the crowd fell silent. Day in and deep, ready to fight. This is not the end. I know it's not over. Won't stop till we won. Keep on moving forward. Go and tell them we're not done. I know it's not over. Let's shine like the sun. He's still getting bolder. Go and tell them we're not done.
If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out at Run With It Band, at Run With It Band, everywhere you follow people at, or go to runwithitband.net. It'll take you to all the different links you want to go to, and there'll be a little button you can click for booking information. Now for today's podcast.
The Live and Create podcast.
Read through your bio.
Sorry.
I'm just wondering how
Sorry
you
about
have
the
how you have time. Don't be sorry. That's incredible stuff. I love it. And yeah, wondering how you have time, one in general, because you're doing a lot of really great stuff and have done a lot of great stuff in the past and continue to do it. But one of the pieces that, and I've seen this online, is the gardening piece. So I'm not a gardener, but my youngest one, I have the four boys, my youngest one, he just declared one day he was going to be a vegetarian. And so that took us down this route that eventually got us, we were starting to do like little gardens on our porch, like peppers and stuff, like very entry level. And it was a fun season. He since has given up on the vegetarian thing. He did it for about a year and a half.
Well, that's cool.
But reading through that and thinking about even the posts I've seen with your gardening, I was like, man, maybe this spring we need to just like bust some habaneros out again and get some, there was just something cool about starting from that little seed and then eating off of it the rest of the summer. Like it's a really cool thing. How did it start for you getting into gardening, that passion?
Almost every job I've ever had in my life, I've just stumbled into it. And I was working at the Midland Theater, and this is before the Power and Light District.
Wow.
Just before the Power and Light District happened. And the Midland Theater at the time was owned by a man that owned all of AMC theaters.
Wow.
And he just privately owned the Midland Theater as a side property or whatever. We booked all kinds of shows there, and it was a really great place I had a friend that had worked there for years, and I kind of came in towards the end, and I ended up becoming box office manager. But I talked my boss into letting me produce a Big Bang Buffet show. Big Bang Buffet was a group of my performance friends that we had been doing shows for over 15 years. And at this point, we were doing them at all different kinds of locations. And I just, on a whim, said, could we do a show here at the Midland? And she said, sure, why not? My boss at the time was she was in trouble a lot. So she actually gave me permission to do this when she shouldn't have.
She's like, I'm already in trouble. I might as well just, you guys get to run the theater tonight.
It was, because it's a union house. So, but we brought in all of our own stuff. And what we did was we put the audience on stage, upstage. So we seated about 150 people, and all the performers performed downstage. And then the backdrop was the theater itself, because that's really the most beautiful part of the Midland.
I was just performing there actually Saturday, and there was a moment I just looked up. I was like, oh my God, I just forget how beautiful this room is. But that setup is a really cool idea for performance.
Yeah, we call this show Upstage Downtown, because in theater speak, upstage is the farther back that you go. And we did the show as a benefit for these. We had all of our friends performing in it like we normally did, but we did it as a benefit for this poetry group in KCK. they had this poetry group of high school students, and they needed funding to produce their magazine, which would be all of their poetry for that year published in this kind of like magazine format. And so we did the show for them, and then we invited them as our guest performers in the show. And the woman that oversaw this program oversaw all these other kinds of programs, and I met her through doing this show. And after doing the show, several months later, I ended up quitting the Midland and ran into her on the street. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And she's, "Come work with me." And I'm like, "Why not?" I was ready for a change.
So you're like,
I needed a job.
let's go.
And so I started working for her doing a literary program through a Vista. I became a Vista, a volunteer in service to America. And it's kind of a program where you work with a stipend and you don't get paid a lot, but it can help you pay off past student loan debt, and you're doing community work. And it introduced me to KCK in a way that I hadn't ever really been introduced to. And in that first year of working with her, she came to me with this big idea of creating a garden program. She had built relationships with multiple schools and principals and teachers, and had found out that a lot of these schools wanted to have a garden, but they just didn't have the resources or the people power to keep it going. So her and I kind of dreamed up this idea. We got a grant through the Kauffman Foundation, and we started off with 4 elementary schools, and then we expanded to 3 middle schools. And we involved between 1,500 and 2,000 students a year.
Wow.
In the program, and did like over 400 workshops. I created a curriculum that we went into the classroom. All through the school year, we would visit classrooms like at least once a month. Right. And work with all of the 6th graders on a middle school level, and 1st and 4th grade in their grade school level, and have the kids actually build the gardens, plant them, harvest them. And then we did workshop curriculum around aspects of the garden. And you can teach anything through a garden.
Right. So I was thinking like there's got to be so many universal themes running through that.
One of our most popular workshops that we created was called the Salsa Workshop. And we talked about salsa being a music, a dance, and a sauce. And we created the sauce in the workshop with like 15 students, some chopping up jalapenos and some, squeezing limes, and some chopping up tomatoes, and some measuring out salt and pepper, and some putting chips on plates. And then we would actually do a salsa dance based on the recipe. And while we're doing the workshop, we're also teaching about the history of the tomato. The dance music history of salsa is different than the sauce history of salsa. But the dance music history was a big lesson that I wanted to involve, because it's kind of an Afro-Caribbean history lesson of Puerto Rico and Cuba, where the people that live in those countries are really the descendants of native people, Spanish people who conquered the native people, and slaves who were brought into these islands through the slave trade, all blending together in a new culture. And the music celebrates all those different parts. You hear African drum in the salsa music, and you hear the brass horns of Spanish music in salsa music. So we're just trying to show that multicultural. We have a lot more in common, and the people in the classroom are from Central America and Mexico and also of African heritage, and that part of our history doesn't get taught. And so that was part of the aspect really cool with the garden. We can bring people together. And a lot of the Mexican students in the classroom are like, "You're leaving out the other history," and that was the history of the Aztecs. And we included that because the Aztecs were the first people to grow tomatoes and peppers ever.
I didn't realize that.
To cut them up and mix them together and make salsa. And food all around the world was incredibly boring until Christopher Columbus stumbled into where he thought it was India, but he wasn't. He was in and it launched this basically raping of Central and South America. But all that.
Well, and that's food, I've always thought about that, like how boring was food that people were willing to die to the extent to just get spices. Like they literally were just getting spice.
Yeah. No,
I'm
I
reading
mean,
Dune right now and they talk about spice in there. And I'm like, it really is here. It was legit just like paprika or whatever the fuck spice it was.
so much of our food comes from Central and South America, and it saved the world. I mean, potatoes ended up saving huge cultures of people in Europe and Asia who like
So
were
potatoes are from Central America as well.
potatoes are from South America,
South
the
America.
Andes Mountains,
Okay.
Peru. That's where potatoes started
Huh.
5,000 years ago. Uh, And they grow 4,000 different kinds of potatoes there because the mountain climate has so many different variables in it. And they teach us how to grow potatoes the way we should be growing them. And that's with a variety of species, because not every plant survives every year. Different diseases or different insects, different characteristics will kill certain plants. But if you have a variety of plants in your garden, you're going to have more success. And with monocultural farming, which is what they do to grow all the potatoes for McDonald's French fries, they're basically having to use so many poisons in the soil because the plant is such a weakling.
Right.
It can't survive on its own because it's just been coddled to grow in this monocultural
Very
environment.
specific thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they have to basically kill all living things. We teach that lesson. We teach about George Washington Carver, or we have. I ended working on this program about 2 years ago. I did it for 25 years, and in the last 2 years, I had a very difficult time getting funding, and so I ended up having to kind of walk away from something that I started.
That's
And
hard.
and I thought I had someone that was going to carry the baton and move it into their programming, and they had kind of assured me that that was going to happen. And somehow, through one reason or another, it didn't quite happen for them. And so some of these gardens have been kept alive by parents in the neighborhoods around the schools who have demanded that the school not tear it out. We always did the program and never charged the schools for paying for it. And we started off that way. And when we really needed funding down the road, it was hard to ask them to pay for something that they'd already been getting for free for a long time.
Like, wait, why?
You know?
Why?
And it's also hard for people to wrap their head around how important it was. It was one of those things where I did what I could do. I had an influence for 25 years that I did the program. I worked with almost 2 generations of students, and many of the students that I worked with as first graders, fourth graders, and sixth graders would become a high school student and come be a mentor and help run the program.
That's pretty cool.
I learned a lot. I was
Sounds like you did. You got an
did.
encyclopedia on.
I know.
the
I can tell you
history
all
and
about
the location.
potatoes.
That's wild.
And for me, I'm from farm people. My ancestors were European immigrants who came into this country in the late 19th century and homesteaded on land in Nebraska and became farmers, and nobody got rich doing it. And a lot of them, ended up working in raising cattle because that seems to be where money is and stuff.
Right.
I had that in my DNA. Most of us have that in us somewhere, because
Somewhere down deep.
Yeah, and you can kind of see it in the students and in the population of students, because different cultures of people gardening is just part of their life. Growing their own food is part of everyday life, and so we had it was really a great experience to learn from the students. And I kind of did it by myself. I got to kind of call my own shots, but when you have a job like that, it's more than a 40-hour-a-week job. It takes over your life. And I was I was washing hundreds of tomatoes the night before I would go out to do a workshop, and I would do 6 workshops in one day at a middle school. There'd be maybe 35 to 40 kids sometimes in one class.
Oh, man.
And so we're making salsa
That could be intense.
Yeah, no, it's humbling to say the least. I think everybody should work in a middle school because it's you get to check your ego at the door really quick. And
Middle
And
schoolers will do that to you.
yeah, no, kids are so brutally honest, and right off the bat, I was encountering things that I was like, how do I deal with this? And I ultimately came to the decision that I'm just going to be another example of a different kind of adult male, white guy, in their life, and they can end up drawing their own conclusions,
Right.
but I'm not
Well, I'm
really going to.
sure that was such a powerful impact. I think of Don Simon is up in Smithville, and
Yeah,
working with students. And I even have one of his students on my podcast because of the things they're working on. You can just tell, like, it makes such a difference to have that person who's able to show them, like, hey, this is a little different perspective, and you coming at
right.
it from a different angle. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially then through the conduit of gardening, which I imagine for some that was probably their first time experiencing that, but it's something that can
Some
be part
people,
of their lives
yes.
forever.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, a lot of times the teacher would be like, no, this student got in trouble. They can't go out to the garden today. And I was like, no, that's the person that needs to go into the garden. I always wanted the kids that were in trouble because they always did the best in the garden. They were just bored, or school wasn't being applied in a way that captured their attention. Everybody's different, and school is so much about conforming and lining up and being quiet and staying within the lines. And I know it has to be like that to establish order in a big school, but it's hard that way for a lot of students. And so I kind of liked a little bit of chaos when I was working with students, and
And
I
you're
kind of
perfect for
allowed for.
middle school then. You're perfect for
Yeah,
middle schoolers.
nature is basically chaos. Real life is.
We think we're in control. We think we can put it in rows, but
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I met gardeners from Somalia who don't plant the way we plant in this country, and plants are all together, and it looks like someone would say, "Oh, are you pulling your weeds? What's going on there?" But it's actually far better for all of the plants, for the soil. Everything's growing in a different way than this row order thing. But, when we did our gardens, we built raised beds, and they were 4 foot by 12 foot beds, and some of our gardens would have 18 beds or more in them. And we had like some beds that were always going to be there. They had like native plants or butterfly beds or strawberry patch or a herbal garden we call see, smell, touch gardens. And then other ones got rotated with all different kinds of things growing. But we always try to keep it look orderly for the
right.
school, because schools are institutions that are all about order,
Yeah.
and
Everything in a row.
yeah. So, anyway, it was a great, for me, I also, I'm a gay man, but I always wanted to have kids, but I have a partner that I've been with for over 30 years, and that was like, no. And it's like, yeah, you're probably right. It takes a village, but all of us have a biological urge to care for the next generation. It's just part of being a mammal, I think, or a human. And so this job gave me an opportunity to apply that immediately and I got to be someone that walked in and made an entrance and then got to leave. Like teachers are there all the time.
Get them riled up. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. And every classroom was different. Every school was different. Every teacher was different. And I had to kind of just adapt to their way of doing it and bring my program into it, but it was an adventure, to say the least.
Well, I know middle school and high school, we've seen this in our own boys. It's like there becomes this like branching out. So they want to understand, I think, the tribe more than just our local family. And so
Right.
I've noticed there's, even like, so Daniel Cole, my drummer, he doesn't have kids, but there's come a point where they look to him. He was just way cooler than dad, and like, even one time we were flying out for a show and they all said bye to Daniel. And I was like, hey, what about me? And they're like, oh yeah, dad. So I think that role is such a vital part as well as kids,
Yeah,
because they
right.
want to know and understand and find investment from other people, other than just
Sure.
mom and dad,
Definitely.
you know this, I'm sure. But
No, I was a kid like that too, because I started working in a restaurant. I started paying into Social Security when I was 12 years old, and I worked a lot of hours every week at a restaurant, and I grew up working in it, and I was only, I think, I don't know, child labor laws were different in the 70s, or maybe it's really
they're like, I don't know.
But I learned so much, and I was working with adults all the time in a restaurant, and I got taught all kinds of lessons that my parents would have never taught me. But all the adults treated me, I was a kid, but I was also a coworker.
Right.
So it's like, get busy, kid, or go clean that up or whatever.
Like, get on it. Well, and I know it's 25 years of investment. So this might be a tough question, but I'm curious, is there a story of impact with one of the students that sticks out to you?
There's so many. I have so many feelings about it. I don't know. For me, it was always, I don't know. Students, I found this to be, in my case, I've friended certain teachers on Facebook that I knew from like a long time ago. And I was able to tell them like 20 years later what they meant to me. But at the time, I didn't bother to tell them that. So they have to do all this work, and it's like getting a thank you that late, kids aren't like that, so I always accepted that too as part of the thing. I really liked the idea that we could use the garden as a metaphor. And I originally talked about the pollination of flowers. I learned how to talk about how flowers pollinate over time, but at one point I felt like I was doing sex education in the classroom. And a 6th grade girl raised her hand and said, "Do flowers get periods?" And
awesome.
It's such an honest question
right.
in the middle of a classroom of people. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to answer this in an honest way. What am I going to say? But I ended up saying, yeah, they do. They have their own cycle of fertility. They have a cycle of fertility also, just like humans do, and animals. Quick. Yeah.
Dive right in, and you're like, yeah,
I know. And so, we did a worm workshop where we talked about worms, and we identified all the different worm parts, and part of it all is just blowing their mind a little bit, because you need to do that. And it's like, how do you tell a boy worm from a girl worm? Do you know?
No, I have no idea. I don't even know if I've contemplated that there would be genders to worms.
Yeah, worms are male and female at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So they have ovaries, and they have the other part. I can't think of the name. What's wrong with me?
Testes?
Testes. Thank you.
Really? Exactly. I had no idea.
They have ovary and testes. So when two worms mate, they both are inseminating each other at the same time.
So they can just keep kicking them out.
They can. If you have the right worm bin, because we did worm bin workshops and talked about how you could recycle waste in your house and make money from it, because the substance that they create is very good for plants, and you can sell it and make money off of it. And you can literally make money off your garbage with worms, and that would freak them out too. Like, I'd get out a big bag of castings and say, "This is like $30 here," and they're like, "What? You're kidding me!" And then I would have them smell it, and it smells like soil, just to get them to think about worms in a higher level, because worms don't get credit for everything that they do. But yeah, when two worms mate, they both get pregnant, and then they lay eggs, and their little eggs hatch, and little baby worms.
That's insane. I didn't know they even laid eggs.
Yeah.
I don't know how much brain power I've put on it, but I've never, you're blowing my mind here. I'm like the middle school. I'm like, no shit.
No, so there'd be some kid in the classroom that'd be like, "So it's a fag worm," or whatever. I would hear that sometimes, and I'm like, no, it's not that. I mean, I usually try to answer questions with facts and not make a big deal out of it and get all out of line. But it's like, no, it's not like that. It's not about that. It's not about attraction.
Yeah.
It's about their sexuality. It's kind of like worms are blind. They can't see, they can't smell, they can't hear. They can only feel. So nature's giving them a little extra abilities to make up for it. You know what I mean?
You kind of got screwed on this one, so we're gonna help you out a little bit. You do something cool.
No, it's like when they have worms with eyeglasses on them, it's like, no, they're anthropomorphizing them. But yeah, it's
you're like not accurate,
right? But they do so much good. They really do. They keep our soil Charles Darwin said all the fertile soil of our planet has at least once passed through the body of a worm. And basically that's what they do. They make all of our topsoil for our plants to grow in so we can have food to eat,
That's
So,
wild. Well, obviously,
sorry to go off on that tangent.
No, I was just curious about it. I figured there was a deep passion in there from the gardening. And like I said, like we just scratched the surface of it, but it is a fascinating world. And
it is.
It's cool. Like you said, where you can, for me, it was a context to connect with my son and encourage this choice he was making in his life. Even though we were all like heavy meat eaters, we were like, hey, we're going to do what we can to encourage this choice, and, but this passion here that you also have this passion in music and in arts.
Right.
And I'm curious for you, specifically with the music, where did that passion start for you?
It was kind of my escape, music, because as a young kid, I knew at a very early age that I was interested in theater and performance. That bug hit me like in second grade. I was like doing a puppet show and I remember the puppet saying underwear and the whole classroom goes crazy. And I'm like, wow, this is so cool. I love this, and I said it again, underwear. And, and I'm like, and I realized that for me, the stage was like a place I felt safe. I didn't feel safe in the real world. I really didn't. I came from my parents were like at odds with each other a lot in my childhood and fought continually and didn't really love each other.
Hard.
And I was the firstborn son of their marriage, and I heard a lot of their fighting and was involved in a lot of it. And I always felt different being a queer kid. I always felt different in a very small town in Nebraska. But radio was like an outlet for me, and I remember different radio shows and discovering different music. And I started collecting records when I was like 12, 45 records, 7-inch records, and it became an obsession for me. And then the idea of doing a radio show, I used to pretend to do a radio show when I was like 11 in my bedroom, and I was broadcasting to nothing, but I was just pretending to do it,
I love it.
And it's like, this is like my side thing. My real thing is theater, but radio will be like my side thing. But I always loved radio. I loved the idea of the connection between this person you don't even know talking to you and then playing music for you. And then all the information, all the storytelling aspects of radio. I feel like you use more of your brain when you're listening to radio. They've done scientific studies that show that you use more of your brain sleeping than when you're watching TV. Because TV like just gives you, TV is kind of where we go sometimes to want to blank out if we're not watching the news, of course. But like radio, it affects you differently, and you actually imagine what the person that you're listening to, what they look like. You paint all these pictures in your mind about it, all of it,
right?
And I love that part of it. So it was like a relief. It was like a release for me. Like I said, I worked in theater, and the theater work got me into the gardening work. And when I did the gardening work, I was doing community service and working inside communities and helping build communities. And I had always heard about KKFI, and I had done some projects. I had done a radio show with KKFI in the 90s that won an award from the National Federation of Community Broadcasters.
Nice.
From one of our performance shows that we produced for the radio. But I was always afraid to go to KKFI because I'd heard stories about how crazy it was there. And
just the intensity of it?
Yeah, it was a young non-for-profit. And when I got involved with it, it was like at 13 years old. And I was brought in by a woman who hosted the 10th Voice, which was an LGBT public affairs show. And that's what I worked on for about 9 years at KKFI. And I became the executive producer of the show. And one thing we did was we had a youth radio. On the 4th week of every month, we had high school and middle school kids host and produce the show.
That's pretty cool.
And I just mentored and kind of stood in the back of the room and made sure they pushed the right button. But I let them have complete control. And it was that also was a real educational experience for me. Then when I started doing the music show, I thought, well, this is great. I can just play all of my favorite music that I never get to hear on the radio. And I like to mix it up. And the show that they gave me was a midday medley show that was all genre. They wanted to play all the genre that KKFI offers, mix it all up in one show. So I really took it seriously and put artists that you'd never hear back to back. And eventually people from the music community started asking to come on the show. Like, can we come on and talk about our new album, or can we come on and talk about a concert we have coming up? And I was at first like, well, I guess I can rearrange the playlist for this, whatever. That was
like, but the playlist was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah,
now you're making me mess it up, right?
Right, and then Abigail Henderson, who started Midwest Music Foundation, she came on the show a couple times, and then she came on. She's like, "We like to think of this as our show," and I'm like, "Oh, you do? Oh, wait, huh? Wow, okay." And I started to change my whole way of thinking about the radio show, and realizing that it's community radio. Community radio belongs to everybody. This show I'm doing, it's not really my show. It belongs to community radio. Why not try to focus more on this part of the story of music? I'll still play like national releases that I like and stuff, but why not play more of what's being done by artists? And that was sort of the beginning of it for me. And then once that started happening, I have like 150 guests a year on the show. In interviews, and do like try to play as much new local music as I can, although it's hard to keep track of all of it. And last year there were, I think like 6 years ago, Chris Hagarian and Michelle Bacon, and I try to help them a little bit, but keep a big list of new releases of that year. And for a long time it was like a 200, 250, then it got to about 300. And then during COVID, it went way big. And it was like 2 years ago, like at 600. Yep. And then last year was over 1,200.
Wow.
Maybe 1,300 new releases, singles, EPs, albums. And that's just what we knew of. I'm sure there's even more,
that didn't even make their way. That is fascinating, because that's something we've been talking about in Run With It, just conversations around Kansas City. Because to be frank, when we first came on the scene, I just never felt, and as a band, we never really felt accepted anywhere, to the point where I remember sitting down with some friends who were in the scene, and their challenge to me was like, well, go and tour, go find your own, like, go find your people, whoever those people are.
Right.
And so that's what we did. And so we didn't really put a lot of focus to Kansas City other than this was home. Right. And, but so going out on the road, we found success there, and then suddenly started finding some success here in Kansas City. I say all that mainly to point out where our conversations now are like, dude, the scene here is just it feels like, one, it has grown exponentially. Two, the majority of the people, especially I would say a lot of artists in their 20s, that we're meeting, there's just this openness, like a huge openness. And to be fair, maybe at the time when I came in, I wasn't open. You know what I mean? So I'm not like, there could be many layers to that.
Right.
But there's an energy and an openness in Kansas City that I feel like, being here for a long time, I'm like, it seems very unique to Kansas City now. And then this level of artistry of people saying, no, we really want to do this. So, and then to hear those numbers, like, no, there's more and more people releasing really cool shit and getting it out there and doing cool shit and doing it together too, collaborating.
Yeah.
That's fun.
No, I had been a part of different communities of Kansas City, and I'd been a part of the theater community of Kansas City, because I did a lot of work in theater at Unicorn. I worked in all the theaters in Kansas City, and I learned that community and became part of that community. And then I worked in restaurants, and I became part of the restaurant community of people, which is pretty tight-knit and fun group of people. And then the gardening world was another kind of world that I got to be a part of. But when I met the music community, when I started doing the music show, what I didn't realize is that the music community would accept me into the community and be like, we love you, bro, and I'm like, that's wow. Cool. And I felt more accepted in the music community as being my total, true, honest self than I did in most other communities that I've been a part of. That's and cool. I also recognized this idea that most of the artists that I encountered in the Kansas City Lawrence music community ego was different than in other, like in the art and theater world. And the competitive spirit was different. It was more of, we want to go to the top of this mountain, but we're all going to link arms together and
Let's all
march
go.
up there. And I felt this collective spirit. I know part of that was the Midwest Music Foundation and the work that they did to try to create a safety net for all musicians.
Yeah, which is
And
huge.
that kind of was an equalizer right there. Like, we all want to be healthy and we want to take care of each other, right? You know? And I just saw this collaborative spirit of, like, the way tribute shows are done with people all from different bands joining, like the David Bowie tribute shows are one of my favorite things to see every year, because it's such an amazing band, but they're all from different bands and from their own worlds, but they come together. Yeah, and I to me, the Kansas City music community is really beautiful. I make the mistake of assuming it's like that for everybody, because it's not perfect. And so I love it when I have a musical guest on and I'll say something about, like, isn't the jazz community, you know, everyone works together, and then the artist will be like, I didn't have that experience. And I was like, oh, you didn't? Okay, that's great to hear, because it's not all as perfect as I think it is sometimes. But we do have a special thing in Kansas City and Lawrence, I believe.
Yeah, I think there's something brewing. You know, obviously the world is looking at us in a lot of ways. For a lot of reasons with, you know, the Chiefs, you know, sports help a ton too. And then we got the World Cup coming. But I feel, especially with the World Cup, I feel the energy, it's like, it's amazing that the arts, I feel like, are rising and expanding at the same time as the world is coming to us. And to me, I feel like it just makes a powerful mixture of excitement. I don't know.
It does.
Like something, you know, bubbling up. And yeah, and I do sense that collaboration and community in Kansas City myself. And like I said, for me, it could have just been, there could be many reasons why it didn't feel that way. Or maybe just, you know, the universe or whatever wanted me to, like, get out on the road for a season. I had to learn some shit out there, and that's the only way I would go. I don't know.
No, that, I mean,
but many, it is. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
There's a lot of artists that don't go out on the road, and they're like, why can't I make it? What's going on? It's like, you need to go out on the road. You need to go to other markets and prove yourself in other places and build an audience. And if you can get a certain number of people that will support you on a regular basis, then you actually have a business that will sustain itself, you know, as an artist. And so, like what you were doing, so many people don't do that. They need to do that, and for whatever the reason. But everybody kind of comes into the music business trying to figure it out, and there's a lot of pitfalls along the way, and there's a lot of people that will take advantage of artists, and a lot of work that you don't get the payoff maybe for the investment. It's so much of it is out of love, and then there's so many demands on writing the music, producing it, and then you have to go out and sell the record and promote it, and then go on the road. It's so much work, you know. And I know from theater, and the audience never knows. You don't want them to know about all the work. You want them to just come see a show and the magic of the show. I find lots of similarities between a touring band and a theater a play that, you know, is touring. You know, there's a lot of the same elements. You have a script and a set and a show, and
we had blocking, we had all, you know, all the things to do that well.
You have to believe it and sell it. You know, people have to believe you as the singer of that song. You know what those lyrics.
It's the exact same night after night for, you know, however long.
Yeah, right.
It's that audience's first time most likely experiencing it, so you got to bring that same level of passion, energy, whether or not.
And every show is different too, right? You know, it's like no two shows are ever exactly the same.
I mean, that's true, because then the mic dies, and then you do something acoustic, or you do, you know, whatever it might be. And when we think of Kansas City music scene, and you think of how you have this show that is part of the community, what excites you the most about the next, you know, year to 2 years in Kansas City?
Oh my God. Sometimes I don't look into the future like that. Like maybe I should. Like sometimes I'm just living week by week. Like you're only as good as your last show.
Right.
And I just finished a show and I have to make sure that another show happens. And when you're interviewing folks, it involves like a little bit of research and trying to be prepared for them and promoting the show too. And maybe I do more work on it than I should. But yeah, I see a whole new generation of artists in their early 20s kind of growing up. And then some people that like I first played them like 8, 9, 10 years ago. I've now grown up a lot, you know, and I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. The music business is just changing so much all the time. Some people are like, why make an album? Why do that? You know, and I'm like, please make an album. I love when people release an album.
It's funny you say that because I've been very heavy about do not make an album, do single after single after single. But we just had, like we said, our 2025 initiatives as a band recently. And that was one of our big discussions where we were all sensing like, it's time. We're going to go back to doing EPs. You know, some of it's strategy for like, you know, collections of work and trying to get them into licensing. But the other part is we're realizing I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. We've just been talking about this so much, but realizing the singles drop. The idea is get content and get connection with new fans. And that's great. And I'm all about that. But what we're realizing is like, we would rather have 10 super bought in fans than 100 casual, like they might look at it a few times and then scroll up. And so, and the more getting to understand, why do you like an artist? Like Kendrick Lamar is one of my favorite artists. And so his album GNX is just over and over. I want to hear the album. But so basically we started thinking like, so for our fan as well, it works on the strategy business level, but over here for our fan, they want more. They want that super fan seems to want a collection of works, kind of like you. Is that your experience too?
Yeah, I'm sort of old school in a way, because like when vinyl came back, I was so thrilled because the idea of the record store was like that's like a community center for music nerds that we can all hang out together, and you can go into a record store and not know anybody else in the store and end up having like a 2-hour conversation with like 3 other people about a whole bunch of different things because you all love like, what about this band or this record or that concert? And we all share those experiences of listening or being there. I mean, albums are such a big part of that. And I'm just like, do both. Like, put out a series of singles to promote what eventually will be a release of all of those singles.
Right. I saw David Luther just did that. He dropped like a single, but he has his, you know, full album. I think his album or EP, I can't remember. But yeah. Both end. Right. Both end. Yeah.
There's Ivory Blue. I don't know if you know Ivory Blue, but I've watched Ivory.
She was on the podcast, I think in the spring. And then her and we first met in Asheville, North Carolina. I had been following her. I knew she was from Kansas City, and she said she had been following me. We were on tour. We just happened to stop in Asheville, posted a snap. And then she was like, hey, me and Clarcha are here. And that was the first time we were laughing. We're like, how's 2 Kansas City artists? The first time we had dinner was Asheville, North Carolina.
That's a cool place to have dinner.
Oh, yeah.
No, and I think Clarcha has a daughter that lives there.
Yeah, it was like daughter or son, something like that. It's been a few years, so I forget who, because they had joined us that evening.
Ivory has such a Ivory has such a, you know, amazing story as a human being, and just they're like basically kind of being orphaned and a runaway at one point and being adopted into a family as kind of a grown adult and then starting this whole career. And Ivory had some people that tried to take advantage of her and the rights to her music and things like that.
Yep.
But eventually started putting out singles and then would put them out as an album. And last year chose not to do that, but has 2 albums out. And at least for the discography and the history of a person, it's a way to help with that body of work that you have and a way of preserving it in a way that will make it timeless, you know, and go into the future. But yeah, I say do both. Put out the singles and then collect them all together on an album. release, even if you don't want to do it physically, you can do it just digitally, but through all the sources. But that's kind of my preference. But what do I know?
Well,
I'm
I
a
do
non-Spotify person, so
gotcha.
right there, I'm disconnected from a lot. But I still feel like I can tap into the same music, but just in different ways.
Yeah. When it does seem that people who are very passionate about like up and coming bands, like you're popular, you're not at the Grammys, that they want that storytelling of it. And I think at EP, like we released one EP and I still go back to that album. We still perform it. We'll be performing it on when we come in for Mid Coast Live. And there's something about even me personally, I connect with it because it was like, that was from an era. And this is what I was going through in this era,
Yeah,
and
right.
so now we're trying to explore that same kind of concept again. What does it look like to capture it? Because the singles, I'm proud of the singles we have put out. I really enjoy them. And they still point to an era, but it's harder just from a storytelling perspective, I think, to have that out there consistently. They're just kind of like out in the ether. They're out
Yeah. No, last year most releases were singles. A large
there.
part of that
Yeah.
1,200 single releases, but
And I was a big voice on telling everybody, I was like, why are you doing an album? Do singles. No one wants albums. Stop it. I was that guy. And now I'm literally going back on that.
I mean, that's kind of the trend in a lot of ways, like you said, but at the same time, it's so much fun for a lot of bands want to have a vinyl release, and that's a whole nother layer of
One day.
time and
I
waiting.
can't make it
and
make financial sense yet, but one day.
That's where like certain music labels might be a good collaborator.
Interesting.
For different reasons. There's a couple different music labels that really know how to do that.
Like here in KC?
Here in Kansas City, that can help with, like Sean Saving has done a lot of that with bands, help them. It's been a lot of work for him, but
Right.
because it's just getting it right sometimes, but because a lot of, it's just weird how vinyl made a comeback.
Mm-hmm.
And all these record stores that had been closed down. We had a bunch of new record stores open up, and I think there's like 13 record stores in Kansas City, and that's a lot.
I didn't realize that. That's wild.
Yeah, we've lost a few recently, unfortunately, but yeah, it's because there was a record store in Kansas City called Recycled Sounds. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it was right near where it's actually where Clint's Comics is now, where Westport Road meets Main Street, just a block down from KKFI.
Oh, okay.
On Main. There's
and I live like way out we live during pandemic. We moved out to Platte City. So
okay.
Basically my downtown experience is going to Wright with my band in River Market and then driving back up 169.
I hear you. Yeah, that's okay. You live in beautiful. That's beautiful over there.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's people from the music community that live over in your neck of the woods, like Sarah Swenson. Do you know her?
I know the name.
She teaches high school in Platte City, I believe, and she is an amazing singer-songwriter. She hasn't put out an album in a few years because she's been raising a family.
Yeah, and I've had my oldest went through that high school, and then my second oldest is in there. So I wonder if it's one of his teachers. So.
Yeah, Casey Rausch.
Yeah,
she's from that neck of the woods, and then her whole family is like, the Rausch family has like this musical heritage that goes for multi-generations, and the Shy Boys are her cousins, Colin and Kyle Rausch. Have you ever heard of the band Shy Boys?
No, not yet. But, you're educating me. This is good.
They're a really good band, but I think they originally came from over there. But yeah, Recycled Sounds was this really influential record store, and a woman named Ann Winter ran it, and they had lots of in-stores from bands, and they sold local bands music, and it was just kind of it was kind of a community center, and Anne did all of these different things through that record store, created a whole 2-week festival called Culture Under Fire, celebrating First Amendment, and was involved in all different kinds of things. And she was a huge mentor to me, and she unfortunately killed herself. And
I'm sorry.
We had this giant funeral, and there's like hundreds of people there, and it's all music community. The whole music community is at this funeral. And I'm just looking at all these people going, we're all connected because she loved us and we loved her. And that connection, that was part of my experience with the Kansas City music community, was her also, because I immediately had things in common with, like, Robert Moore, who hosts Sonic Spectrum. He worked for her at her record store and loved her dearly. And I loved her too. And so we became friends because we both loved her. But she was just really a nurturing person. She had a radio show in KKFI. She had the very first punk rock show on the radio in Kansas City. Right. So a lot of young kids in town would listen to her show and then the next day run to the record store and buy that record or awesome. Whatever, and end up working there. And I always felt like record stores were part of the whole story of the music community, along with the studios and
the studio venues. The studio world and the venue world is where I've never had a vinyl. I've never gotten into the vinyl thing myself personally, but definitely the studio worlds and the venue worlds. Like, I remember the old record bar. I literally would office there every Friday. Go there. I don't know if you remember the bartender Manny who used to be there, but I would literally just go office on Fridays during the day. And there was one time I forgot my laptop. So I had this big ass iMac, like a 27-inch. And I brought it in there during the day and I kept working while the show was setting up and the crowds were starting to fill. So I was in there with like this 27-inch iMac. I was like, I look like an idiot. I'm going to go put this up.
No, that place was, I miss the old record bar too. I love the new record bar, of course, but the old record bar had a very special.
There's something about it, man. There's something.
Yeah, the little snug area. I don't know if you know that little. It's like the end of the bar that kind of curled around.
Yep.
Chris Agarian was often in that area.
That tracks. He'll go find that one spot. He's like, I'm gonna sit back here, be low key.
Yeah, if there's a band that it was like touring and they're playing the record bar, it's like, go there and see them because you're going to be like this close to them. And I saw some really amazing shows there, and I live like a couple blocks away from there.
It was weird going to eat at I ate whatever that place is called now. It's like a brunch place or something.
First Watch.
Yeah, Daniel and I went there, grabbed breakfast. And I was like, this is so strange. It's so weird.
Yeah, the old record bar is now like a health grocery store, you know?
So I'm a few iterations behind.
The First Watch was there while Record Bar was there.
No, well, did First Watch expand into there?
No, it's just the owner of that building didn't want to have the record bar there.
Oh, okay.
And so he closed it,
using it all then.
And a health foods grocery store moved into where the record bar is. Gotcha. It's hard to imagine it now because there's a grocery store with aisles and stuff. But yeah, right. First Watch was always there. Was always there.
Well then, yeah.
On the end. It's just our minds and our memories, and we squish these things together a bit.
Yeah, it definitely squished in my brain.
Yeah, it seems weird, but because they changed I did a radio show. On the radio show that I did a special called Story in a Song, where we invited guests to read a story about a song that changed their life in some way. And then we played the song. So they'd come in, I'd introduce them. I'd say, what's your story? They'd read the story. It'd be like a 3 to 5 minute story. They'd read the story. And at the very end of the story, drop the needle, play the song. And it was like a really interesting way to kind of explore different kinds of music.
I love
And the music was normally not what would be normally played. It was usually like some top 40 hit or something, and a really interesting story to go along with it. And we did these over the years, and they would always have huge emotional impact. People would call in like, I'm crying. This is amazing. I love it. And so we did a live version of that show where Betsy Ellis helped me put together this super group of musicians, and the readers gave the band the songs that they were going to be doing stories about, and the band learned all these songs.
That's a cool idea.
And the readers never knew what the songs were going to sound like, and the band never heard the stories before.
Nice.
And then we did it live at the Record Bar on a Tuesday night of the same night that the All-Star game was at the Royal Stadium that night.
Mm.
And it was a packed crowd. And we were doing it as a benefit. And bars are loud, but we told everybody that they had to be quiet because we had to hear someone tell a story.
Right.
And so you could hear a pin drop at the Record
That's
Bar.
awesome.
It was like an amazing night. It was a very special. I know my story involved a song by the Carpenters.
Yeah.
And another song was the Velvet Underground. Another song was the Beatles. Another song was the Velvet Underground, the Harry Chapin. The band had to learn all of these different songs.
They probably got the list like, okay, guys, we got to go to work.
It was like so emotional because they would hear the story and then they'd be like, then they'd launch into the song. And the person that told the story got to hear their version because they didn't do the song exactly like it was. They kind of had their own interpretation, but it was really one of those kind of special nights at the old Record Bar.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I know you're doing great things in the city. As a band, we're appreciative of it. Thank you for your openness to us, inviting us in.
Sure. No, it's interesting to hear you talk about how you felt about the community, like, 8 years ago or whatever,
Yeah.
and how you didn't feel accepted into the community at first. And I was really interested in hearing more about that. And because you've always brought like your own confidence and your own power into the what you're doing and your passion into that, so I didn't see that. You kept that. You had your kind of the way you were presenting yourself,
right?
Was in a way that it just seemed like you knew exactly what you're doing to me. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm glad it came across that way.
No, because I'm like, why? Because I feel like, I would always want to try to help if anybody did not feel welcomed in the community, or what's the reason for that? Because it shouldn't be like that ever. And I've never really had a point of view of being a curator or somebody that's like a gatekeeper. I just want to always have the door be open for everybody as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think you definitely exemplify that, especially how like the diversity of your show and the way you bring in whenever we've seen each other in public, those kind of things. Yeah, I think my journey with it, like I said, I look back now and I do think there, as of anything, there's always two sides to the story. And so I feel like as I came in, well, I don't know. I know I carried my own insecurities into it personally. And I think the other part was too, is like, I think I initially felt like and I'm not talking about you specifically. This is not like some passive aggressive way to tell you in any way, but like I think the people that I connected with at first, it was kind of a closed wall is what it felt like. And so I think I didn't have the perspective at the time that like, oh, this is just a pocket. I had the perspective, this is the entire scene. And so I think that is another piece where I've had some friends kind of challenge me as we've had these conversations of like, hey, blow it up, because there are different pockets, just like, trying to find who are the people you easily connect with. And there's going to be people you connect with well and people you don't. And that's fucking life. Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I think that no doubt that was one of the perspectives as well in going into it. So yeah, I definitely think there's a issue of my own that I brought into it, perspective. And I think I just met a few people who were just kind of assholes out the gate. Right. You know what I mean? Like,
no, there are assholes.
Like I said, it's kind of, I feel like, especially over the last like few years, more and more openness and seeing, I think in some ways being introduced to different pockets that I didn't know existed really, where I'm like, right, these people are really cool. And these people are really cool, and I did share on, Amanda Huey. Are you familiar with her? She was on the podcast and we talked about another piece though, where this is my my own fucking baggage that I bring into is so my like quick side story is I used to be like headstrong, evangelical pastor, like all this kind of stuff. I used to train pastors, all that thing. And I completely left that world. And that meant, so the group I had committed my life to, it felt like I lost overnight.
Wow.
Amanda went through a similar story. As she was in ministry and doing all that and completely, left that. And we were talking about that perspective of like, community. And sometimes when you lose a community to that level, like maybe I can count on these 4 fingers the people I'm still in contact with. I realized it's made me hesitant to really want to dive into any other community. I think, and I kind of discovered that on the podcast while we were talking.
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
and so that's made me ask too, you know, like, how do you remain open when you've gone through losing like your entire support system? You know, because
Yes.
it's scary, you know,
Right.
at that regard.
Right.
So I've just started, we'll do counseling. You're my counselor today and unpack it. But yeah, just trying to unpack like I've been trying to wrestle with, you know, as I see excitement now in Kansas City and I have excitement for what artists are doing in this city, trying to unpack in my own self. Okay, why did you feel this way? And what got you here, you know, and what's changed?
Yeah.
So
Right. That's fascinating. I had no idea about that, but that is difficult. That what you're talking about, leaving community like that and not looking back, and that's hard to do. It really is.
right. Definitely.
Amazing. Wow. That's it's something to write about. It's good that you're having these conversations too then, because I think the more we talk with other people and process it and get it out there, and so many times I feel like our job as writers or artists is to help translate the world we're living in to everybody, you know.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of performance art and poetry is helping to translate what are we living through right now, and how can I understand it better?
Right.
I think that's what music does for people, along with it being therapeutic, because more and more studies are showing that music is a very therapeutic
Right.
thing for people, all kinds of physical or emotional or psychological things. Music is a healing element.
Yeah.
In so many ways, and you know that. I have to tell you that. You're a musician. I mean, I always feel grateful for the musicians in the world, because you hear things differently than everybody else does. You know, musicians have an ear, a musical ear that is more sensitive in a way, you know, and that's a gift that you can share with all of us. You know what I mean?
One, I love that too, like, where you're like having that perspective, like as an artist, you know, it's like we've been wrestling with this idea of authenticity a lot too, of like, how do you become more authentically just yourself? And it's like, as an artist, you know, as a host, as, you know, the more, I feel like the more authentic we all can bring, authenticity we all can bring, it's like, it begins to give more and more permission to other people, you know, like, to where they open up, and then, you know, it's like, you know, maybe good shit can happen in the world.
Yes.
And compound on top of it. But
for sure. Definitely. I think honesty, and Ellen Ginsberg, one of the Beat poets, said, "Candor dispels paranoia." And that it's just a simple little quote, but like being totally honest and candid, and it can like erase so much of what about this, or what are they, you know, trying to imagine or wonder. If someone just tells you the truth, it's so much easier, and it cuts so much, you know, so much time doesn't have to be wasted.
right.
When you're just like, you know, upfront about that in a loving, helpful way too. But
The delicate balance.
we have the Midwestern passive aggressive thing in the Midwest, and I always appreciate East Coast folks coming in like, get to the point, you know.
Yep.
You know, like a four-way stop is really tough with Midwestern passive aggressive. You know what I mean? It's like,
no, you, and like,
yeah, no, you go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't realize how Midwestern I was until we started touring the East Coast. I was like, oh shit, okay, I'm way Midwestern.
I know, and I like that. Like, come on, we don't have all day here, folks. It's like,
well, this has been a great conversation. I'm looking forward to coming in, doing the show as well. But last 2 questions of the podcast.
Sure. Okay.
So right now, how would you define living a great life?
Okay, I saw these questions before, and I tried to be a little bit prepared. But one of my favorite playwrights, George Bernard Shaw, he was like an activist playwright, and he wrote a lot of beautiful plays. One of them was a play called Arms and the Man, and it's really poetic, and and it has a lot to say about war and humanity. But he said, when I die, I want to be all used up, and I feel the same way. I feel like I don't want to have any regrets, and I want to feel like I gave as much as I could to make that happen, or to make this happen, or to try to keep something going, or to help build. Because I think so much of what we're doing every day is building our community, and we're trying to make a better place for the people that come after us. Obviously, isn't that what we're supposed to do? And so I just, like, if when I die, I'm going to be like, I did my damnedest. You know what I mean? I gave it all I could. I tried to leave it, like you, try to leave it on the, leave it all on the stage and give a good show for people. So to me, that's kind of the definition of a good life, is that I tried everything I could. I worked my ass off. I tried to be as nice as I could to people, and also honest. I tried to be honest about all of it,
That's awesome. I love it. And George Bernard Shaw, I got a George Bernard Shaw quote up on my Facebook as well. You got it.
I was like, should I quit this like white playwright guy, but he really did write a lot of great stuff, and he was sort of he sort of was a critic of the government a lot of the time, like, why can't this be done? And he was also a vegetarian and probably a socialist. Who knows? I don't know.
Exactly right.
That's right. But he wrote some really good plays,
I love it. Well, and I love that perspective. Leave it all on the stage. Our lives as a family, me personally, we are incredibly busy people. But I've thought to myself, it's like, well, the alternative is what? Sitting here watching TV, sitting here, like obviously we need to rest and enjoy them.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I really love the things that we get to do.
Right.
And the alternative is, not contributing in those ways. So yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. Our lives are a collection of experiences that we treasure, and with the people that we love. And the more of those that we have, the more amazing memories that we have to like think about, and like, wow, we did that. Wasn't that so much fun? And the people I'm closest to are the people that I lived through these things with, and I've held on to my very closest friends for, over 35 years. We've held it together as a group of friends, and that means a lot to me. That's what I treasure the most, actually, and my family, of course, and my sisters and my mother and my dad and all of those folk. But my chosen family means a lot to me also. And gay kids kind of have to do that too, have to kind of go out there and kind of find other people to be part of their family. Because your real family just doesn't understand, some of the things. And also being an artist too, being somebody who's interested in theater and the arts. Sometimes your real family can't wrap their mind around it, in the same way. So we do what we have to do to make it, but it's a community. Ultimately, that word means a lot to me. That's why I love community radio. It's not perfect, but the idea of it is beautiful,
Well, and I love how you shared how the show was like your show, and then you realized it kind of it has grown into something bigger than just you. And is this
right? It's not my show. I'm just helping to facilitate something and try to keep one little. And there's other people doing radio show, like Chris Hagarian and Michelle Bacon. I have a huge respect for all these other people that are also trying to help shine a light on our community and what's happening, and help try to build it and make it happen. And what you're doing too, like with this podcast, and because sounds like you've had lots of guests already.
Yeah, I think you're episode like 155, I think. And
that's amazing.
A lot of really cool guests. We have my one earlier today. He's out in LA. So I've had someone who was out in Spain, but it's a lot of folks who I know from here, or were originally here.
Yes.
They've gone on other spots.
Exactly. We still claim all these people. I mean,
I still think of Henry as a Kansas City band,
exactly.
Even though they all live in LA, or LA and Chicago.
They're a local band, and Iris Dement, who I don't know if you know her, but she wrote her first songs in Kansas City in her mid-20s, and she now lives in Iowa with her husband Greg Brown. and they're both like critically acclaimed folk music artists who are just, but she, she still has an 816 cell phone number. And I asked her, can we still call you our Kansas City? And she's like, no, I still will always think of Kansas City as my hometown, even though she grew up in Paragould, Arkansas, and California. She talks like she's from Arkansas. But yeah, there's a lot of other artists like that too that we're going to always call them. Janelle Monáe is going to always be a local artist because she went to Quindaro Elementary, where I have a garden, where we built a garden.
That's
and we want to claim her, along with other folk, like that.
That's amazing. Well, for the last question of the podcast, right now, how would you define creating great things?
God, yeah, I read that question. How would I define creating great things? I think realizing that it's going to be work. Okay. So knowing that it's going to be work, make sure it's something that you love. Okay. Because if you love it, then it won't be so hard to carry the burden of doing it. And then why are you doing it? If you can answer the question as to why, what is the purpose of doing this? What is the reason for this? Then that also will give huge motivation to the project, and hopefully you're trying to help other people by offering them entertainment, a reprieve from their life, art, a story, a way out. We did a Fringe show last year for the Fringe Festival, and it was a show that I loved to do and I hated to do at the same time, because I had a 24-minute monologue that described a really, really difficult thing that I lived through.
Yeah.
But I wanted to tell that story in a graphic, honest way that got people's attention.
Right.
And every night we did it, I had people in the audience that came up to me to talk to me about their own experience. And that was hard, but also that was part of the reason of doing it. And so I really felt like it was work to do it,
Mm-hmm.
But I loved doing it. And I really felt like we had a mission, like we had a really important reason to do it.
Right.
And that meant something, and then the bottom line is, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. You know what I mean?
Like,
and
nobody wants this. They don't want you to do it because
always have in the back of your mind that if you don't want to do it, don't do it. You have a way out. Always. The show doesn't have to always go on. That was what our show was about. The show must go on. No, it doesn't have to. You know what I mean? I mean, there might be a reason why it shouldn't go on, but I don't know if that, I'm not even sure if that answers the question or not.
Well, I feel like, especially wrapping up in that why, to me, it sounds like you're saying, if you understand the core of why you're doing it and you have this passion for it, that whatever flows out of that ultimately will turn out great. In a sense. Is that
right? Right. There, I've found in Kansas City, there's this, I've noticed it in myself and I noticed it in so many other people, but people are like, oh my God, I need a place. Where am I going to do my stuff? Oh, well, I'll just create something. I'll create a venue so I have a place to do my stuff, and I'll invite other people to come do their stuff on this same venue. And I feel like so many things have been created that way in Kansas City over the years. And the balance of that is make sure that you still have time to be an artist and not just a presenter or a producer. Make sure you're still, because if you're a creative person and if you're an artist, that's going to be something that's just going to be inside of you all the time, that you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to write music. You have to perform music. You have to do theater. You have to be a writer.
Well, and Neil Gaiman talks about how with success, it tends to kill the creativity, because he's like, my full-time job becomes, checking email and, doing promos and doing this, as opposed to the writing that got me here. And it's like just that too, where it's like, it can become a trap where you're like, now I run a venue, but I really wanted to be an artist.
Right.
How do you manage that? And that gets tough. I deal with that, like leading the band from a business and, milestones, and we got our spreadsheets and whiteboards. It's like, but I really just want to write for 8 hours and forget to eat.
Yeah.
Let everyone know how they can connect with you and keep track of all the shows you're up to as well.
One easy way is just to Google Wednesday MidDay Medley, because I didn't name the radio show, that it was the station's name, and I just never changed it. All the other people that took that time slot ended up giving their shows other names. But I kept with Midday Medley, Wednesday MidDay Medley. It's too many syllables and people always say it wrong, but whatever. But if you Google Wednesday MidDay Medley, you can get all kinds of, we have a WednesdayMidDayMedley.org. It's our own like WordPress site where we put all of our playlists and like what's coming up on the next show. And like our best of for the year lists are all there. And there's a search engine. You can literally put a band's name in that search engine and find out information about that band, because we put a lot of information in our playlists. I say we in a collective Gemini way, but but yeah, KKFI.org also is a way to learn more about the station, and that station has 87 weekly locally produced radio shows. Which is kind of unheard of in the broadcasting world, you know, and it's run by 4 people on a paid staff and 200 volunteers. And
wow.
And certain volunteers have to step up and do roles. Like I'm the chair of the programming committee right now, and it makes for a lot of extra work. But you can help make things happen if you do that and have an idea. Like we recently opened up our schedule and added 12 new shows and brought in like 25 new programmers into our family of programmers, because we needed to bring in more younger people, more women, more people of color, diversity. And we did that by saying we wanted to do that, somehow making it happen.
I love it.
But yeah, I think all those ways can help find me. WednesdayMidDayMedley.org is a good place to start.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.